We all love to watch classic movies. That's why we consider them classics. It's easy to name a classic film off the top of our heads, but what about defining what a classic movie is? What makes a film a classic? To put it simply, a film that is classic is a film that is memorable. To put it in a more elongated definition, a classic film is a movie that contains an aspect or an element that is memorable, unforgettable, and resonates with the audience long after it's released. A memorable element could be a few things. It could be a memorable line of dialogue, an unforgettable soundtrack, or an iconic shot or scene. There's always something about these films that we remember long after we viewed it. This is part of what makes Star Wars a classic.
The Falcon! The Millennium Falcon! Oh God!
Star Wars is an icon in American cinema. It has all of the memorable elements that make this series as a whole classic. John Williams' symphonic score.
The Falcon! The Millennium Falcon! Oh God!
Unforgettable characters like Han Solo, famous lines of dialogue,
I know.
and the many iconic scenes make it worthy to be called a classic.
No, I am your father.
Star Wars isn't the only film with these elements. Take a look at Back to the Future, a staple of the 1980s and one of the most popular time-traveling films of all time. Like Star Wars, Back to the Future has memorable characters like Marty McFly and Doc Brown. And there's not only just memorable characters that make it a classic. The iconic scene of Doc and Marty in the parking lot with the DeLorean, the timeless soundtrack, and who can forget this line? And just like the 80s, the 90s were chock full of just as much classics. The 90s were the decade that spawned the independent film movement and gave us some of the biggest filmmakers today. The biggest of those filmmakers would have to have been Quentin Tarantino with his second feature film, Pulp Fiction. It stands out as having some of the best lines of dialogue to ever exist in a film.
What ain't no country I ever heard of? They speak English and what?
The unforgettable lines of dialogue from the film probably wouldn't be as iconic if it weren't for Sam Jackson's line delivery. I'll show you what I mean.
English, mother. Do you speak it?
Yes. What?
Say what again? Say what again? I dare you. I double dare you, mother. Say what one more goddamn time. Does he look like a?
What?
And this is only one example out of the hundreds of films I could have chosen from this decade. Films from the 90s had many unforgettable moments and lines that are often quoted today still.
Look at me, son. It's not your fault.
The 2000s, however, don't share as many memorable moments. Classic films from the 2000s are considered modern classics instead of just classics because of how fairly recent they are. With that said, the 2000s had films that set many trends for modern films. What do I mean by that? Well, let's look at Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films, for example. They really showed Marvel Studios at their best. Even though most would consider Blade or X-Men the start of this superhero trend that we see today, Spider-Man was the one that convinced Kevin Feige to expand their universe into something bigger. It showed that you could take someone as ridiculous as Spider-Man and make something both silly.
Hey, Freak Show! You're going nowhere! I got you for 3 minutes! 3 minutes of playtime!
And fun. While still being taken seriously throughout. It even gave us the memorable line,
Moonsaw is ready!
no, not that one, this one.
With great power comes great responsibility.
The Dark Knight is another film that I would consider a modern classic. It gave us Heath Ledger's unforgettable and mesmerizing performance as the Joker. And who can forget the line,
Why so serious?
what sets this film apart from others is that it set the trend for Hollywood to make dark, gritty reboots of classic films, comics, books, and other types of media. It also started the trend of shooting everything in a dark and desaturated visual style.
Now, Mike, I know a lot of people dog on Zack Snyder for his visual style, because when you think of the Justice League, I think generally people think of something more colorful like this. But really, the idea of taking a fun group of superheroes saving the day and giving it the visual style that makes it look like footage of the Holocaust is really a bold choice.
Who knows what classics we'll see from the 2010s? Is it too early to decide which films we would consider modern classics, or does time not matter for them? Well, to put it simply, it depends on what you believe.